Oh, okay. Confirmation of agenda. You happy with the agenda? Nobody want to change anything? Right. Nobody got a disclosure of interest under there. So we'll move on, and Nicholas can work out how to do that. The confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting, which are there, and the meeting was back in 29th of November.
Matter of clarification, Mr. Chair.
Certainly, clarification.
Mayor Toby Adams is listed as non-voting. Is that?
Yeah. So yeah, apologies for that. There was an issue in relation to e-scribe just automatically filling in. It just wasn't picked up. Okay. So he has been changed online. And he's also been changed in the minutes, which is available on the agenda that went out on as well. So the only version that'll have it incorrect is the physical copies we have in the room at this stage. Yeah. All alternates have voting rights if they're there. Yep. Sorry, my apologies.
But when the prime person is here, then the alternates don't have voting rights or speaking rights or anything else.
That is correct.
So that is correct. That is how we run it. Okay, that they're true and correct record. Mike Bunting, you were here. Are they true and correct minutes of the last meeting?
Oh, totally. We've never seen anything truer. Yep, fantastic.
Thank you very much. Moved. Alan Goddard is here. They were true, weren't they?
Yep.
Thank you, Alan. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, they confirm true and correct record. Thank you very much. We move on to the next item, which is the update on the activity or priority actions in the group work plan. Julian.
Sir, thank you. I will just apologise for my paper in front of me in a hard copy. It is online, and I do try to be nice to the environment, but unfortunately with a quarter of an hour before the meeting my computer's crashed and doesn't come back up, so I'm happy to plough through with some paper. So in terms of the group plan update, so I think it's fair to say that there's a repetition of message here, and unfortunately it's repetition of message is that progress in delivering the CDM group plan has been impacted, not just by vacancies, but it's also been impacted predominantly by the impacts of the COVID response. And there is some good updates here that I'm going to give, but the substantive connection to this report is later on, where we actually talk about what we can complete, not what we've done to date, because that's been the repetition of message that we've actually been impacted. We continue to be impacted. We're currently working in bubbles. Again, that means people working from home. That does limit the engagement opportunities in terms of some of the work plan stuff, and it also impacts on other productivity that you cannot get out of all of our staff with the local government reforms, etc. You're not going to get 100% out of people who are having to work remotely. It's just not doable. So it is, the message is we're still impacted. But there is some good news and some good progress, but the substantive issue is later on, where we talk about how we're going to address this going forward, or the recommendation to how to go forward. What I will touch on is some of the main challenges and some of the main progress that's been made by the staff across the group area in the reporting period. And again, contextually, it's been a very short reporting period, even though timescale wise it's the same as everything else. We have had the summer holidays within and Christmas holidays within this period. So one of the biggest issues is COVID again, which has meant whilst we have agreed face-to-face training and we are in line with local government or the local government response unit advice on how we can do training safely and face-to-face under the traffic light system, there is understandably hesitation from some staff across the board to engage in that training, and also members of the community in terms of some of that community response plan and community engagement. There is a degree of reluctance, which is 100% understandable in the context. The biggest challenge we've had in the reporting period is the exploring or engaging the consultant in the iwi Māori space, the engagement in the iwi Māori space. And we run a procurement process later or last year as a result of a resolution that you made. And unfortunately, we were not able to allocate that contract. We've run the process, we've closed the process, and we were not able to issue the contract in that area. The engagement of that contractor and the progression of that piece of work is a key foundation of a number of pieces of the priority work programme that sit within that. So I have got an update later in that EV work programme, and then there is an update that's not on that report from a meeting I've had this morning with the Deputy Chief Executive of NEMA in this space, which is a positive outcome. So I'll come to that later on. In terms of positive, we have got work underway at the moment. So there's a number of pieces of work in this priority work programme. Another foundation is, or piece of foundational work that requires it to progress is the hazardscape. And we have got a contractor at the moment undertaking a risk profile, including scenarios with our staff and our partner agencies to refresh and renew what we think is our risk profile for the region. That will feed all sorts of pieces of work within the priority work area, such as keeping the hazardscape up to date, allowing a conversation at some point in the future around what recovery looks like in those areas where the greatest risk is identified. So that's a positive piece of work. It also informs the first part of the review of our group plan. The other positive is the progress on Whisper, which is a tool, again, that you approved probably 12 months plus back, which is a consistent tool or platform across the region where for streamlining and making efficiencies around how we communicate with the public and also how we communicate with ourselves. And it's consistent whilst each councils have got different platforms and they rely on, for example, Antenno. Some councils rely heavily on Antenno for public engagement. So this tool might not be useful for the public engagement element for them. It will be useful for the social media and emergencies engagement, and it makes things far more streamlined and also staff call-outs. So the rollout will be completed by April this year. It was knocked back. It was expected to be December, but with the COVID, but we do now have councils who, as of today, a number of councils will be going live with this, or the ability to go live with this, and then we anticipate all the other councils having gone live by April. So there's been some good progress made in that space. So that's where we are to date. Note in the context of short, really working time since the last meeting because of the holidays and the impact going forward on COVID. But there is a substantive item later that talks more about how we're going to, what we're going to deliver ideally and how we're going to deliver it in the next 18 months.
Okay, any questions?
Just a quick one.
Quick one.
Quickly, I do apologise, but we did have problems implementing Whisper because of our antenna. Yeah, that's now on South Pocket. I think we've actually resolved that problem. So we're moving ahead with that quite well. And the other thing was just the training. We're moving forward with that quickly. Under red, we are noticed we cancelled those a little while ago. So is that still going forward?
Yes, we've got our own bubble for the training in terms of we've separated them out, and they are able to deliver now face-to-face training within the limitations of the red traffic light, orange traffic light. Now, of course, we've gone straight to red very quickly. And what we found is there are a number of staff members who should be undertaking that training, ideally, who are reluctant to. So there is at a national level, there is a push to try and convert the current courses into online courses. And we're looking at it regionally to see if there's anything that we can do to meet the curriculum and the syllabus and not undermine the national product if you want, but still deliver it. But NEMA are looking to officially review that and how can we do more online training. Of course, there is a bigger, but not bigger risk, there's a connected risk to that. If people are really comfortable in undertaking, if we see an increase in people wanting to do the online training rather than the face-to-face training, saying there's a degree of comfort there, then it creates me a little bit of heartburn in terms of how comfortable would people be in turning up to an EOC or any other coordination centre in a red setting because of because of concerns and understandable concerns about COVID. So we get trained out the door, but is this a signal that actually we might struggle to get people through the door of an EOC in an event that we had to open a physical facility?
Thank you very much.
All happy? The resolution that the information from Julian be received. Thomas moves. Lou seconds. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, the next item is update on local government reforms. This is a neat one. What's happening, Julian? We're doing the government reforms?
So local government reform. So we've actually, this is a report to give you, just to give you some context of what we're doing to support the group in understanding the impact on emergency managers. So this is actually, if you look on page 18, this actually provides an overview of all the government reform, central government reform that's going on at the moment. And emergency management is a tiny piece of that. And this is significant for local government. And you, going back some time, created a subcommittee made up of the members from Taupo, Thames Coromandel Council and the chair of Waikato Regional Council as a subcommittee to consider any submissions. And I think you've already put one in on the National Natural and Built Environments Bill. What we've now done is we've engaged a company called Becker. We being the GMO have engaged a company called Becker, who are looking at all, because they're dealing with a number of these reforms for different organisations and councils, and they're actually using that information and knowledge that they're pulling it all together and actually saying these are all the implications for local government, and this is how it's going to impact. We believe this is going to impact civil defence emergency management or emergency management generally. So this brings all the reform together and shows the throughput. The bit that I'm trying to push with Becca is that actually there's opportunities. It's not just about the risks, because I think there's quite a bit of focus across, quite rightly and understandably, across central and local government about the risks that these reforms pose to the current way that we operate, or the rate base, or the income, etc. But there's some real opportunities here, because if you go through our group plan, and I want Becca to focus on those opportunities. If you look at the group plan, the National Disaster Resilience Strategy, which is in essence our guiding document around how we should be doing business as a sector, there are a number of things in there that I would say to you are beyond our scope. They are, when you're talking about, when I say beyond our scope, I'm talking about civil defence scope. It's not beyond local government scope, but you talk about increasing people's resilience through better homes. So there's the economic, there's the built, there's resilience through better homes, through better jobs, economics, etc. All stuff that I would say that we are, better planning, we are on the periphery of, and we are invited, we're invited in rather than being a member at those tables around town and district planning or spatial planning. We're a guest rather than a fixed seat. And there's an opportunity for us to try and influence those other pieces of legislation and actually get more input and say into the areas of business that
Good, Maxine. No, can't buy. Yeah, really good, really good. I'm sitting in the most boring Zoom meeting you've ever heard of. Them. Just making sure.
Thanks. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you.
Councillor
Sorry about
Bunting, if you're going to criticise this meeting, I suggest.
Oops, sorry,
you might
they heard me say that.
Doing so.
Was it on purpose or what?
No. Are you there, Councillor Bunting?
Well, sorry about that, guys. That was embarrassing.
That was embarrassing. Yes, embarrassing for you. We all heard it.
Well, yeah. So step it up a bit. Your interpretive dance element would be great. Thanks.
Okay. Where do I go from there? So look, Becca are pulling all this together in terms of where the where the opportunities are for us to try and link in and get a seat and changes to the other legislation, not just focusing on what changes we can make to the emergency management bill. And the KEG have formed a subcommittee to support Becca. Becca have been really clear that we need to be able to respond promptly and outside of the cycle of KEG and joint committee meetings, very similar to what you did last time when you created that subcommission or that subcommittee for submissions. KEG have created a workshop where they will help Becca's or inform Becca's thinking around local government, and that information will be provided through to yourselves. And there's an opportunity to continue, if you're happy with it, to use the subcommittee of TOPO, who else? Sorry, TCDC and Waikato Regional Council as that flexible joint committee subcommittee to look at submissions. So it's just an update really that we have engaged Becca, who will probably provide us a really good service in terms of linking all those pieces of legislation together, rather than the GMO just focusing on what it is for emergency management.
We heard before you came in that Becca have produced a document on transport through the Waikato, and one of the suggestions is that Langley tells me is that everything be taken off the territorial authorities and put under control of region. I think that's what Langley was suggesting. That's put out of left field for us.
Under a regional model rather than pointing directly at the regional council. But
so it could be a regional model managed by Haraki.
It could be a CCO like Auckland Transport, for example.
So I just pointed out they have some stuff out of left field with everybody.
And the good thing about having somebody able to just focus all the time and effort like Becca is they will be able to identify all of these left of field, but not just the risk. I've got to be really clear here. There's massive opportunities here. We've got a document that we do not. We've got a document, that NDRS, that National Disaster Resilience Strategy, is supposed to be our guiding document, but we have to go cap in hand, in essence, to a number of these legislative bodies, whether it's local government or other agencies, say, can we have a say in some of this to try and influence some of these resilience increasing opportunities, whether it's coastal management, whether it's RMA, whether it is improved housing or anything else. So that's the report, sir.
That's the report. Any questions? Councillor Bunting, do you have a question?
No questions from me, thank you. It's very entertaining.
Yeah,
I'm not going to live this down, am I?
In the report, it says that the first report from
There you go, Max. I'll call you that.
you is
So
being- so is that a policy review? I think it calls it. But is that on target?
Yeah, I've got a meeting with, I'm going to speak, Jill will correct me if I'm wrong. I've got a meeting with Becca this week, I believe, who I'm going to go through that first review and make sure, as I understand it, and make sure that what I got in my mind and what they're delivering are one and the same thing. We're on track to deliver by the end, and they finish at the end of June. That's currently where we are.
Yeah. Through the chair, Julian. 6C, policy redirection away from environmental effects. That's quite an interesting statement. Is that as a result of Kaikoura?
So this is out of, this is, I don't know the full context behind that. That is this bit that you're looking at on page 18, that is the overview of, and the 6, that's the overview of Becca. That's what they're saying. This is their interpretation of all the central government, and there's a move and a shift towards well-being rather than a specific element of environment, what the drivers are behind that.
The core business. That's the sort of thing.
Langley, comment.
Yeah, so just in terms of Pip's question, so the policy direction away from environmental effects, so that's on the resource management reform. So at the moment, if you're applying for a consent, you've got to be shown to mitigate effects, etc. The future is now looking at outcomes, so there'll be, say, set criteria that you have to meet for a discharge. So irrespective of whether it's having a not having a negative effect, you'll still have to meet these criteria. So that's what that one's around.
Thank you. No other questions? All happy? That the information we received, Russell Smith moves. Anna Park seconds. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Kerry, Julian, it's you again. Trifecta.
Me. Okay, so this is an update of what you probably already know, but it's for officialdom. The NEMA, National Emergency Management Agency, are undertaking targeted engagement. They've done that. They did that in January, mid-January. And we have, which is in the pages before, we have submitted we have provided a submission based on the questions that were asked that went through a number of committees, and we did that in within the timeframes that we were provided. So the submission is high level, and but that's based on the high level briefing and the engagement that we have been given. So what we're informed is that there will be further opportunity for submissions through future parliamentary processes such as the subcommittee. Now, since subcommittee, since can't think of the select committee. That was the select committee. So the update that I've got that's not in this report since writing the report is we have had a briefing from NEMA that select committee process, whilst it's out of the control of the minister and it's in the hands of the House, so to speak, they're aiming to have that select committee process run before the local body elections this year. So we anticipate, based on the conversations that we've had, that if the minister gets her wish and gets the slot in the select committee that they want, there will be a lot of work around July and August for the civil defence group in terms of understanding the impact assessment, the regulatory impact assessments, and when they get shared by NEMA with us, and therefore whether we wanted to put something through the select committee or not. So there was some feedback very strong feedback given by members and elected members, members from this group and from elected members elsewhere in the country around the timeframes and the process used for engagement. And I can tell you there was a meeting, again, it's not in this report, but I've been separate conversations. There was a meeting with mayors and the minister recently as a result of that feedback. And it has been discussed between ministers and mayors across the country around the process and the time frame. So that's a good sign in terms of the meeting has been convened as a consequence of being heard and the frustrations that NEMA heard from the elected members. The one thing I did want to stress, and it's on paragraph 9, there was quite a bit of talk on, and it's very nice to hear. I'm grateful for the thanks that group managers got in those meetings, and it was a repetition. I went through, I think, every one meeting I sat in on those engagements, and there was a repetition message thanking the group managers, plural, for our support and input during the process. What I do want to flag with you is that there were limitations, very clear limitations given to us as group managers, that we couldn't share the content. It was a soundboard, it wasn't official engagement. And we were clear back that we couldn't speak on behalf of the civil defence groups. And I wouldn't want any of the members thinking that I, as your group manager, agree with all the proposals. There are some things in there I do agree with as your professional advisor, so to speak. There are some things I have some questions about, and I would like to know more detail. But my concern is when you hear the message that your group managers have been involved, you may actually think, well, if the group have got this and they're comfortable, then I'm comfortable. I'm saying to you, that's not the case. So when it comes to engagement and review, it's, the value is there in making sure that we do make the submissions and we do present feedback.
But again, it was the understanding I took when they said that on the Zoom program that the managers had all been involved, and I thought, hello, if Julian's happy with it, that's a good start.
And there are lots of things that are good in there. But there are some things, and that's, you know, that, and there's a reflection of the feedback that we as group managers have provided. There are some things that we weren't aware of until they came out in the engagement process. You know, we got at the same time as you, and there are some things that need some more work and some more conversation that I wouldn't be happy with.
As it explains to me, is the latter part of that sentence on number 9, which I don't understand. Thank you very much.
Why government hell bent on getting it in place before the elections?
I don't know. I don't.
Are they also looking at centralisation?
That's one. They're not looking at centralisation. That's not coming across to me. So as a matter of fact, the message I have received in the meetings this is my interpretation, of course, it's not in writing anyway, but the message I have received, I would say centralisation is not on the table. There is a tidying up of roles and responsibilities, and one of those options around one of the first questions is around, I think there were 4 options. One of them is the status quo, and one of them is there's more of a regional role. So there's a scale there, and then there's somewhere in between is tidying up roles and responsibilities. But certainly the feedback I've had is there is no appetite for a centralisation from a national down to a local system.
But more regional control is one of the.
That's one of the options that's on there. But that I think there were 4 that. Again, the feedback I've received, not in writing, but in conversation, is based on the submissions from the CDEM groups, there is probably little appetite, or not a great deal of appetite, for the right-hand view of total regionalisation. There is more of an appetite for somewhere in the middle.
So we are making a submission?
We've done that submission, and we've done that submission, and I think the next step now is the regulatory impact assessments, and the feedback is collated at a national level. They will consider that, and then they'll put out the regulatory impact assessments along with their firm proposals. And then our next step is the select committee, if we want to.
How many of our members are putting in submission? No.
I don't know. We put one in as a group, and when we shared that with the group members to say, if you want to, there's the basis for your document, if you want it to be, or if you wanted to add something different.
We accepted that in support of it, and white party, pretty much so.
All right. Any questions? Nice simple meeting. That the information be received. Alan moves, Philip seconds. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Contrary?
Sorry for that. I should have asked. I take it. Are you comfortable as a group to continue to use the previous subcommittee? Yeah. For any submissions that come through out of sync?
If they're happy to, yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Better ask them.
Okay. Nima, update.
Kia ora koutou. Just through the chair. So for those that don't know me, my name is Chloe Marshall and I am your REMA for the Waikato group. Firstly, I'd just like to, again, I know Nima's already thanked many of you for your time and effort with the engagement with the Trifecta program, but just to reiterate that it really is appreciated, and your concerns over the constrained timelines have very much been heard, and we really, really do appreciate the efforts there. Many of you may know that Suzanne Bowles has resigned. She was your obviously previous senior REMA, and so I'm still sitting in that REMA space for you, and we are currently recruiting in the Auckland area for more REMAs. So there may be some changes coming up for us in the next few months, but yeah, watch the space. January, February this year have been very busy for NEMA as well as yourselves in terms of responses. There's been a number of responses which have meant the standing up of the National Crisis Management Centre, or NCC, and also, yeah, there's just a lot going on with obviously Trifecta. Another big project that NEMA has underway at the moment is the 24/7 Monitoring, Alerting and Reporting Centre, and you might start to see the acronym MARC around. So this is going to overtake our current duty system. So there'll be, yes, a 24/7 awake duty team in Wellington, and who will monitor all the different inputs from partner organisations, GNS, Met Service, yourselves in the groups. And sort of it'll just increase our situational awareness and of emerging risks. So that will have flow-on effects, and the system is due to be stood up at the end of June. But you know, any thoughts that the group do have on that as it gets up and running, we're happy to receive, but yet to know exactly how that is going to roll out for everyone. The role of the duty REMA, which is your key contact into the group, will remain. So that's one aspect that's not changing. Yeah, and that's my NEMA update, but happy to take any questions.
Mark, what is it again for? Monitoring?
Monitoring, Alerting and Reporting Centre. So it's just a 24/7 awake duty system. A lot of recruiting going into that space at the moment as well.
Thank you. Questions?
I don't have a question, but I've got an observation that might trigger some questions, please.
Thank you.
So, through yourself, Mr. Chair, so we are aware of, fully aware, and this has been in the pipeline for some time, and this speeds up the public alerting capability of NEMA and the other Crown Science Institutes like GNS. The challenge that creates for us, and when I say challenge, I'm talking about a legal challenge, and potentially leaves us exposed, is if NEMA are to be able 24 awake duty, and they are able to send us a message quicker, because GNS is also, so that you're losing that time to wake up and look at things. We still operate a sleeping duty as a region. So if you fast forward to a critical review of our performance of alerting a particular community of a natural hazard that's been identified by GNS, you could end up in a situation realistically where GNS and NEMA say we notified the civil defence group area within 15 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes of that coming through, because we received it, assessed it, and pushed it out the door. It took the civil defence group area, and this is across the country, this isn't just for Waikato, the other 45 minutes delay is not us. The other 45-minute delay are the processes that go through on a regional basis to wake up your group duty officer, who then assesses it and has a conversation, and then to find a local duty officer. And the latter is probably, well, the latter is my biggest concern, and it's something we are working on and looking at right now. In each of your councils is different, and what we have here is a group duty officer who is on 24/7 but asleep in duty. So there is somebody on the end of the phone who's identified and nominated, and there's also the controller element of that. Some councils, of the 11 councils, they're all slightly different. Some councils have a similar process where you have somebody nominated and on duty. Some councils do not. Some councils do not pay their staff duty allowances to be on duty 24/7, and it's referred to as a catch me if you can. That's what it's referred to locally is. But if you can't get hold of me, phone this person and phone this person. And those are our biggest, if you want, Achilles. Those councils are our biggest Achilles heel. It's not a criticism, it's an observation that is something that I've asked Aaron, who's our new team leader operations, to have a look at. What can we do as a group that we get a consistent local level of sleeping duty. I'm not talking about putting people at this stage on a wake duty. We don't have the luxury of that resource. NEMA have just tripled their headcount and probably more so to do what they're doing. But we do need to have a high degree of confidence that there is somebody nominated on the end of the phone who can take that call and minimise the risk of delay, unnecessary delay. That will have potentially budgetary implications, and we're not talking huge amounts of money, but it may have budgetary implications for some of your councils who currently do not put your emergency managers on a rota being on call.
Langley, got any comments from Keith?
Yes, Chair. It's not something that we've, I guess, actively discussed, and I guess we've got to look at the risk. Do we have people on standby? The 11 councils all through the Waikato region for an event that may not happen 5 or 10 years, or and how critical is that 45 minutes? And replicating stuff at every territorial local authority level, where perhaps we'd be better off to, what's the outcome we're after, which is better alerting of those instantaneous events where warnings are needed, such as the tsunami, or do we have a nationalised approach to that? We don't need 73 of us all doing the same thing, but it's not something we've had a lot of discussion about, Mr. Chairman.
If it's a weather event, we know it's coming, and if it's on TCDC, they would activate and have somebody on standby. So that covers that. If it's a tsunami, doesn't it come out through your telephone on a text message to everybody?
It does. It's so, well, it goes, I don't think it goes to everybody. There are some nominated people who receive the national warning system across the group area. But if you follow the group plan, this is where so if you go back to the trifecta engagement, this is where that roles and responsibilities stuff gets tidied up in the group plan. So if you follow section 17, the group, us or you, and the local authorities at the same time are all responsible for making sure that their communities receive warnings in a timely way, and they're educated, etc., on what to do. What we have got in the group plan, which is a statutory, which is a legal document, is we've said this is how we're going to do it, and the group receives the message from. Even though multiple people are receiving it across the group area, the formal process is the group duty officer receives that information and ensures that the local has received it, and then it's the local that communicates that to their relevant communities in a way that reflects local needs and with local information. So that's how we separate the roles and responsibilities, is through that group plan. But that's where the responsibility would sit at the moment. If someone was to come in for that rapid onset event for Thames Coromandel District Council, local source tsunami, which is on the Southern Kermadec Trench, which would be anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour, then how on notice of the first wave arriving, in the worst case scenario, then any delay, we rely on public education there, that people feel it and do what we've been hoping, we've been trying to tell them to do, but there would still be an expectation that we got some kind of warning out locally that it was coming.
So that's our responsibility rather than NEMA?
Yes, absolutely. So NEMA are the official warning agency in terms of providing us as a group the information and providing it broad scale in terms of for tsunami. This is broad scale for this is tsunami threat to New Zealand. It is for us to localise that and inform the relevant communities. And I hear 100% what the CAG chair says about not wanting to replicate 11 times, and that's one of the things that we look at is what can we provide across the region that's not over the top.
Assuming tsunami is the threat that we're trying to look at, we're talking about TCDC. How would we contact TCDC at 2 in the morning?
They have a duty officer process. They have a shared duty officer process with, so at the moment, the duty phone is shared between Hamilton City Council, Kauraki District Council, Maramapiako District Council, Thames Continental District Council. So they have an on-call person that is 24/7. And if we receive that information, then there is a process. The duty officer would contact the group duty officer would contact the local duty officer and say, have you received this? Have you contacted the local controller? Have you started evacuating your communities? Or instigating your own operational plan at that local?
Have we tested that at any stage?
Not for soon.
About anything?
Yes, yeah, that duty officer process, it's for weather and the cyclone and other stuff. Yes, and fires, we get burn alarms from friends, and we have to phone somebody at Thames. Yes, it works.
So therefore, it's not a big issue for us.
Maybe not for Thames, but it is for, it would be for other councils. It wouldn't.
But the chance of a sudden unforeseen emergency for the other councils that don't have a coastline or a volcano would be limited.
And it's the volcano and the coastline that is probably our biggest risk.
Chloe, you had a comment.
Yes, I just thought I'd jump in there just in case it wasn't clear, but NEMA can issue EMAs, which is the emergency mobile alerts that you're talking about on cell phones for the whole country or specific areas, should they see that as a big risk. So the 24/7 awake team would be onto that, and if there was, you know, a near source tsunami approaching, they would put out that very generic message for that particular section of coastlines, which would target those specific cell phone towers. But then obviously the local group can also issue EMAs with a little bit more area specific information.
Okay.
So sorry, Chloe, at the risk of that sounding a nice package, that is partially, I don't be walking away with a degree of comfort there. That is theoretically correct, but when you read the director's guidelines on tsunami, it is very clear that NEMA are the official information. But when it comes to local source tsunami, they are also very transparent and very clear that in such a situation as the Kermadec Trench, they would not be able, it is likely they would not be able to undertake an assessment and issue a warning before the first wave arrives, because they still have to engage with GNS, they still have to do the assessment, they have to get the tsunami modelers around and have that conversation to decide what is the risk and what is not the risk. And we have got, just for some degree of reassurance, just so we are clear that that would probably be whilst NEMA are the official tsunami, official source of tsunami warning, in such a situation as a Kermadec Trench, we would push something proactively regionally. We decided that already. We would not, it was one of the rare occasions we would not wait for the advice from NEMA, we would push it. We have got a tool that we commissioned regionally with a tsunami expert that would tell us what magnitude earthquake and what depth and what location would likely require an evacuation of our eastern coast. And that's not based on the actual event, it's just based on some inputs to say it's likely to happen. So it's not as scientific as all those people getting together around the table, but it's our best guess. So, and I know that NEMA would not issue an EMA until they were certain that there was a risk, there was a life critical risk.
Okay, so we've got it covered. Sally, you got any comments from TCDC?
I think that it was an issue for us in the last one. I think Tutakaka up north had a bigger issue, and that's under review at the moment. So to me, it's an ongoing thing for us. You know, don't mention the war in terms of sirens, and so we're moving through that, and so it's a work in progress for us. But
Give us an
on our
update on
map,
the sirens.
we still have ongoing issues persuading people that there's different ways of being notified in a timely fashion.
So there's nothing happening in that regard. I just see stuff in the press releases. Yeah.
While I'm online, I need to leave by 2 o'clock. I've got another Zoom around local government reform. So thank you.
2 o'clock, we've got 10 minutes. Almost. Okay, thanks, Sally. Any other questions on that report? Chloe, where are you in Wellington?
No, I'm in Auckland.
You're in Auckland. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions? There being none, that again, the information is received. Philip moves. Russell Smith seconds. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Done. Okay. Julian, you're a busy man today.
Always.
Always.
So this is the substantive item that I referred to earlier on in terms of work programme. Look, our current group plan expires in May 2023. We've discussed the fact that the progress against our current group plan has been impacted for the last 2 years plus and continues to be impacted. So much so that in February 2021, KEG undertook a review of our outstanding actions and gave us agreed a work plan that were what are we prioritising out of what's not being done, and that was agreed. KEG have met since, because even those priority actions, many of them have been progressed, but some haven't, and KEG have met again and agreed to continue to focus on those priority areas that were resolved in February 2021. They've also endorsed the recommendation from myself and the group, the office, I should say, to use external resources to complete that work programme to make sure that those priority items are progressed through within the life of the plan. I'm not asking for any extra resource to do that. The money exists, the resource exists because we've got some vacancies and they've been protracted to vacancies. So we've got so theoretically, that salary saving is one of the reasons that the work programme isn't being progressed in certain areas. So we're just getting external contractors to support us driving that through, but there's no request for additional money. So what this means is there are a number of areas, particularly around the recovery. We're focusing, on our ability to respond and recover. They're the priority actions. The areas of business that we're probably putting down, we are putting down, continue to be in that longer term strategic recovery area. And whilst there are still some recovery and community engagement around recovery actions in the priority list, they are being deprioritised as well, because the central government reforms, we could end up putting a load of money into our recovery space. And what does a recovery look like when the RMA and the spatial plans and the coastal erosion work is all going to change that anyway? So where that leaves us is, if we were to complete all of the actions in the priority list by the end of the group plan, we would have completed 81% of the actions. However, because of the central government reforms and the deprioritisation of some of the priority recovery actions, we're probably going to be closer to 60%. So I could do them, and I could tick a box for you that says we've done 81% by the end of the year, or by the end of the group plan. But we would be investing money to tick a box and say we've completed a plan, when there's really clear signals from the central government reform that says that space is going to change, and any work that we do there is likely to be is at risk of changing, and we'll have to redo it all again. So there is a list. There is a list attached of the areas that we are focusing on, whether or not they're going to be completed by 2023 or whether they would have been started and carried forward into the next group plan if they remain relevant. They are focused on on our ability to respond and recover. So it's that safety critical stuff, and there's no impact on budget. So there is I suppose there's a wider conversation in the next group plan. I know we've got a list. I suppose the reason we're having this conversation around the group plan visibility for you is it's actually in a public document. So the action list, the task list, is a public facing document. There's no KPIs or LTPs around it, but the fact it's in a public document would suggest that people could quite rightly say your work plan, your overall 5-year work plan is in a document. We'd like to know if you completed it or not. So hence why I'm being upfront and transparent around what we're going to complete, what we can complete, what we're going to complete, and what we won't complete.
With iwi Maori representation working with, again, do we take the bottom one that Keg has agreed to carry on with the engagement of a consultant to advise on all these issues? That is how these are going to be dealt with, or is this something that the change in legislation that stipulates the roles of iwi Maori on Keg and Joint Committee will take effect?
So that's the next item that jumps, and what I can tell you is, so Keg's view was we carry on. I've now sought the advice. I've got the advice verbally. I'm waiting for it in writing from the Deputy Chief Executive of NEMA, who has said that what you propose is not inconsistent with the central government reform. So there is no risk, or there's little risk in us continuing on the direction of travel and working with the iwi. So that will continue.
Any other questions?
How many vacancies have you got at the moment?
Two. And one of them is a significant one, being the group recovery. They're both significant, but in terms of particular work plan, the recovery space, the group recovery manager.
How much of this will affect the regional council and its non-financial performance measures? And all or nothing?
No. So the non-financial performance measures for all of us in the first instance are the efficacy of the training, and that is the consistent non-financial measure that we have around, that we undertake an exercise as a benchmark this year, so before the end of the financial year, and then we build on it to show that the efficacy of our training hopefully is good. The other non-financials are very much around undertaking reviews of documents within certain legislative time frames, and being able to respond to an emergency inside and outside of hours within certain time frames. So the response element of it is the focus. So it will not affect those measures.
Julian, do you want something stronger in the resolution rather than just that the information we received, but that the Joint Committee acknowledges the situation that we are in and supports you in your way forward?
That would be, I mean, whatever the committee feels able to do the strong. I mean, we've got we've got local body elections this year, and there may be a change of membership around the table depending on how those roles are allocated by the individual councils post-event. So something strong would be of course very nice from my perspective. So yeah, that would be really good stuff.
I think you need something, and it's either that we support you in the way that you're going, or we don't support you, in which case you've got to get other bodies in place and try to get that up from 60% to 80% for not a lot of value.
And that is, and you've hit the nail right on the head there. It's, I could hit that 81% for you, but it will cost money, and it would probably, there is a real risk that it would be worth nothing.
So is anybody unhappy with the proposal that Julian has said he's going to be behind on some of these things? We acknowledge it because of COVID and staff and every other reason, and it's not a priority for us to get those completed to tick a box. I see Anna Park nodding your head, agreement. Everybody here in agreement? Pretty much. Right, Nicholas, you're a clever lawyer. Tell me what our resolution is going to be.
Looks like.
Like on the second.
Do you want my Bush lawyer?
You give me a Bush lawyer.
I'll get the Bush lawyer. But the information we received and the shortfall in achievement is noted by the joint committee, who accept that many of these items will not be completed within the current group plan timeframe. All happy with that?
Yes.
Oh, you wrote it down. See me afterwards. That's how the TAs work. Lou, you happy to move it?
Very much.
Anna Park seconds. You were nodding head all the way. Yes. All right. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary. Thank you. The motion is carried, and I think it gives direction to Julian that at the end of the period, or if we have a new makeup of the committee, they won't get all anti and say, well, this should have happened, because we've now got the answer that we were aware of it and we were happy with the situation. Okay. We're up to number 10, which is the update on EV participation. And you just told us half of it.
Yeah, there is. I did take half of this, and actually, this probably it's a really good conversation to have. This one, you've previously approved as a committee, so you previously approved an engagement process that will see a contractor on our behalf going out and speaking to Maori iwi hapu groups around how they how they see representation, or what solutions are available, given the complexity of at least 47 entities across this region, how they would see what solutions meet their needs at all levels. That's joint committee, KEG, and advisory group level. I've told you about the hiccup we've had, or the challenge we've had appointing that. But then in the engagement space with NEMA, they signalled very clearly in their documents that they were recommending 2 seats on joint committee. They were also recommending the creation of a Maori Emergency Management Advisory Group, or MEMAG, in legislation that will provide guidance not only to NEMA but also to civil defence groups on matters such as how to elect or appoint Maori onto joint committees. Now, we previously received from NEMA assurances at different levels that the approach that we were taking in terms of going out and asking iwi Māori for their solutions and trying to appoint on joint committee and all points of the regional system as not inconsistent with the way forward. So to see those 2 specific items in the engagement of specifying a number and creating a group that would advise on an electoral process caused me a little bit of heartburn, and actually reflected some of the conversation that was at this group when we discussed it. And there were members in the group who quite rightly said, should we not be waiting for NEMA to provide us the guidance, and we will follow the guidance? Are we at risk of spending money or investing resource in something that we're going to be told to do something different? So I've gone back, I've written to the Deputy Chief Executive, who I've had a conversation with this morning. And he assures me verbally, and I'll wait for it in writing, but he assures me verbally that the number 2 is a minimum and it's not set. So that is the expectations as a minimum standard. So if there was something different to that or more than that, then we would not be inconsistent. And in terms of the MEMAG, or the Maori Emergency Management Advisory Group, then the it is guidance that is not binding. So if they give advice, it is advice and guidance. It is not something that we would be bound to. It is just guidance. So the verbal update that I've had is that we are still consistent with the future for local government in the way that we intend to approach this. And again, KEG had this conversation, and KEG were very clear that whilst there was some conversation around the table about should we stop, should we not, the overwhelming view at KEG was we should continue down this line, subject to the confirmation from NEMA that we were on track.
Thank you. Langley, how do we proceed? The proposal under the new legislation is that representation from elected iwi Māori onto the Joint Committee and the KEG happens. Can we invoke that, or do we have to wait for a legislation to do it? And how do we do it?
Yeah, so in terms of KEG, there's no issues at all in terms of putting appointees on. The Joint Committee that have, if we were to do something now, there's no legislation for them to be voting members. The thing is, it's just a proposal, and if we were to wait for legislation to be enacted on all the other things we do, we'd be sitting around for years and years and years potentially before anything happened. Now, we made a deliberative decision both at KEG and as a joint committee, I think about 18 months ago, maybe longer, that we would pursue the getting the partnership with Māori, and particularly around decision making and civil defence. So hence our position is that we should just advance this for the joint committee. If whatever we come up with, it would we wouldn't be able to, they wouldn't be statutory members of the joint committee, but there are other ways of getting that the partnership and Māori input into our decision making.
That was something we discussed whenever it was way back, to if we went down the track without legislation backing it, as you say, they are non-voting members of the committee. So that's all we can do still.
Until the legislation changes, yes.
So you're employing a consultant person to help guide this through?
Yes. And look, they'll come up with some recommendations around which is appropriate for the Waikato in terms of how we would get that the partnership and Māori decision making in around your table and a KEG table.
What's your time frame, Langley?
Julian, what's next 6 months, was it? Or I'm just
so we've now got to go back. Now we've had the Mr. Chair. Now we've had the update from Deputy Chief Executive NEMA that our proposal, being much wider than what they're saying centrally, is still on track with, to be consistent, we now need to reopen the procurement process. And we probably, based on some really good feedback that we had at KEG, we probably need to understand why we weren't able to allocate the contract, and are we asking in our procurement processes too much, and we're being too prescriptive and putting people off when there's a whole host of work out there for some of these specialist contractors in the iwi Māori space, that we need to be more pragmatic and more flexible about how we ask people to, if you want, consider undertaking this contract. So I would say that we have, once we've got the person in place, it's a 6-month consultation period. That's on paper. Given the other, my only caveat to that was the advice that we've been given from a previous contract, is 6 months, is that iwi Māori are being, also particularly iwi, are being, the demands placed upon them are significant in terms of the central government, local government reforms, and we are very much obviously in their hands in terms of their availability. But 6 months is what we've been quoted. I would suspect it's going to be more like 12 months realistically, and we would be having this conversation at the end of 2022 with the advice from with the advice from iwi or from the contractor and the solutions provided to us by the iwi Maori groups region.
Questions?
Just a quick thing, Julian. At the end of 2022, we're all facing re-election, so most of our joint committee members here anyway will be up for that period of time. Will that impact on these decisions?
No, I think the direction, the leadership that you've shown in approving what is a bigger, it is a bigger framework than most have agreed to, than waiting for central government. I think you've been brave, and I think the leadership and the direction that you've shown will continue through. It's there as a resolution, and we will drive it through. And it just means that it's likely that if the joint committee make changes because of election changes, then the people who benefit from the decisions that you've the people on the committee who benefit from the decisions that you've made might not be all of you. But I don't see any change all around the table affecting that.
Anything can change.
It's true.
Any other questions?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just considering the conversations that have already been had, I'm assuming there is a real desire from iwi to be involved.
Yes.
Just how that looks.
Yeah, absolutely there is. And the message I've had, and it's shone. I think COVID has had many detrimental effects on our communities. I think COVID has also shone a positive light on, particularly March 2020 area, on civil defence emergency management and the role that we play in significant emergencies. And iwi, certainly the iwi Alliance, the Waikato Alliance, the chairs and the chief executive were very close to those conversations. And it was pointed out to me that the kaupapa of the kingitanga, the welfare of the people is paramount, is exactly what civil defence is about. It's about the people. And therefore, we're going in the same direction, and there's a real value add. It seems a real value add. Emergency management fits absolutely with that Manaakitanga and the kaupapa road. The welfare of the people is paramount, or well-being of the people is paramount.
I have Regional Council iwi representative Tipa Mahura is online. Would you like to make a comment, Tipa?
Thank you, Hugh. Just wanted to support the report by Julian and just encourage us to, Katarana is both an iwi chair and the deputy chair of council, so she participates in all of the regional iwi forums. It just seems like a real shortcut if her and I are able to lean in and support you, Julian, to create that engagement. So just, again, just a hand of help. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Vuko.
Thank you. No other questions? That's the information you received. Thomas? Yep. Lou seconds. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. We've got a lot of big decisions being made today.
We can say that. Yeah, you know.
What are we having for dinner tonight?
Chicken.
No, you haven't got ham. Okay. Langley, see, Kev, what are you up to?
So, look, I'll take the report as read, and as you can see, the matters that we discussed primarily have come through to this committee for your consideration. Just the last item on background around the LTP measure. So we are having to just consider how we will meet that KPI with running exercises. So we're still continuing with our exercises, but under the red setting, some of the independent review or oversight of those exercises may be a little bit problematic. Yeah, happy to take any questions, but as I said, most of the matters we considered have come through to this agenda today.
Any questions? Okay. How many years you done on KEG, Langley?
Quite a few, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any questions? There being none, let the KEG report be received. Mark Bunting moves. You got there? Yes. Anna Park seconds. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Thank you. That motion is carried. We move on to Langley again, please.
This one will be me, Mr. Chair.
You, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. That's out. I will apologise for my administrative mistake there. I did that. Okay, so this is in relation, members, to Suzanne Bowles. You heard Chloe from NEMA talk earlier on that Suzanne has now resigned and she now works for New Zealand Red Cross. And there is a reason, and I'll come to it, there is a reason why this is a decision, and it's more to do with administration, but also recognition. I'm asking how we should formally, if and how we should formally recognise Suzanne Bowles. So Suzanne Bowles was our REMA since 2006, and she's only just in the last month, I think, resigned from that role. It's a 16-year relationship with this group through thick and thin, really. She was significant, contribution was significant, not just in terms of the longevity, but in terms of the contribution. For those of you that have been around, and I know many of you have from the start, Suzanne was instrumental in supporting the group to reimagine itself in the aftermath of the 2009, as it was then, McDem evaluation that didn't shine a very good light on the capability of the CDEM group. And what I've seen to date is, having now been exposed to what was McDem and NEMA and been exposed to a number of civil defence groups, is actually Suzanne far exceeded the scope of her REMA role, and some of the work that she was doing, some of the policies that we have here, and some of the key appointments and key or appointments into key roles that we have here were still to this day were influenced or written by or contributed to by Suzanne. So it was more than eyes and ears of the ministry sitting in on the joint committee and providing advice when required. It very much was a proactive, I would say, manager and leadership role, but the unsung hero leading from behind. So it got me thinking about, well, and I know there was a conversation at KEG, how do we support that strong legacy that's left behind? How do we recognise it? And there are a number of things that we can do. They're more conventional things. We can write a formal letter of thank you from the joint committee, which is the norm, and recognition in a resolution. But when you consider the contribution, I would say is significant. I started looking at, well, can we buy her, purchase some kind of memento or reminder that signifies her connection and manner? Can we contribute? Can we expend some money on, actually, we'll get her a morning or afternoon tea and we'll invite her down to say thank you. Is there a formal submission? There is a National Emergency Management Agency awards every year, but that would have to be supported by you if you were going to put a submission in to say this person's contribution has been significant. But then there are other councils that undertake public service awards, and there's a number of councils that have them in our region. But none of these things from B to E, unfortunately, or probably C to E, I don't get B to E, because of the region, and we're administered as a GEMA by the regional council. All the non-financial reward stuff that we're listing there around an appropriate memento or a morning to afternoon tea actually is only for staff. It's not for people who are external to the agencies. And there is no central award for me to point to and say, we have a CDEM award for contribution, for citizenship, for being a good person, whatever it might be. We don't have those awards for us as a group. And there are different awards around around different councils that you may wish to stick your hand up and say, I know TCDC's got one, I'm pretty sure Hauraki's got one, where there's some kind of award we could point to. It would be really nice, and something I will have a look at and come back to you around actually creating our own central award that this is identified. But the question is today, do you feel as, my recommendation, and I'll ask Langley to speak to it, my recommendation, it would be a strong one, is it is somebody who is an unsung hero, who has done significant work for us, who is deserving of a significant recognition. And my question to yourselves is whether you support that or not.
As somebody that has worked with Suzanne in 2006 when she came, I was still mayor of Manukauka then, and the advice and the being on call and the looking for the benefit of us in civil defence in the region was enormous, and it came unbiased when I said we're a heap of rubbish, which we were in those days. She said, yes, you are, but what are you going to do about it? And we worked through how we could make changes and get them supported. And she has been totally behind the Waikato. And if you asked if she worked for the Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management or the ministry, which is who employed her, I would say that she worked more for us than she did for the ministry. Langley, got any comments?
Yeah, look, I'll just reiterate that we've from 2010 when I sort of had a more involved role with civil defence, and we instituted a number of quite significant changes to the way that we build our capacity and the like. Suzanne was an extremely valuable resource. We lent on her quite, I wouldn't say quite hard, but we relied on her to really lift our game in a number of areas. And it was like having a sort of another staff member plus a half a dozen consultants, etc., on board helping us. So we wouldn't have made the changes in the time that we did, and without expending quite considerable more expenditure, without Suzanne's help. And of course, one of the best attributes is that if you were doing something that she felt needed comment, she was never slow at coming forward with a comment, always constructive, but always and brilliantly timed, and something that we always paid good attention to. So no, her contribution, it's one out of the bag, really is, and we do need to recognise what she's done for us in the Waikato.
Anybody disagree? And she has given, she would ring me up on my private cell phone and say, Hugh, you're looking at this, I think you're looking at the wrong way, we should be doing this. And Suzanne and I would debate the issue and always come out with an agreement. But it was nice that when I was trying to sort out civil defence in the early 2006 days, and she was one to say, this is how you can do it. And if you keep going the way you are, you'll probably fail. But if you take it slowly, and bring all the others on board, because civil defence wasn't a priority for the members back in those days at all. It was a pain in the bum that required money, and the TAs would handle it and didn't need the group operating at all. That was basically where they're coming from. So yes, we should. And Langley, I would suspect that the combined 3 councils over there on the East Coast would probably do something to recognise what she's done for that small group as well, but that's separate to us talking today. Yes, we should. Yes, we should. In my opinion, we should buy her a gift. We should have a morning tea and invite her down. We should nominate her for the national awards.
I'll second that. And the formal letter of recognition as well. And to along with what Julian was saying about the Waikato group actually setting up an award for service within our community, I think is a good idea as well.
Thank you. You're all happy with that? Do you need any more to take that on direction?
Not also, it's good.
All right, I move, Thomas second. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion is carried. And yes, I can only wish her well with her. That completes our agenda. Aren't we efficient? What's the time? Sally's gone, has she? 2 o'clock?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. No other joints, comments or anything else? Thank you for your attendance. I declare the meeting closed. Stop recording. Can you stop?